The restaurant glittered under crystal chandeliers, soft piano music floating through the air like whispered secrets. Emma Rodriguez moved between tables with practiced grace, her black uniform crisp despite the long hours already behind her. This was her second job, the one that paid better but demanded more. She smiled at customers, refilled water glasses, and pretended her feet did not ache with every step. At table 7, Julian Bennett sat alone as he often did, his attention fixed on the tablet in front of him. Emma had served him dozens of times over the past 6 months. He always ordered the same thing: grilled salmon, no butter, sparkling water with lime. He barely looked up when she approached. "Good evening, Mr. Bennett," Emma said, setting down his water. "The usual tonight?" For once he glanced up. Their eyes met for just a moment, and something flickered across his face. Recognition, perhaps, or curiosity. "Yes, thank you," he replied, his voice carrying that smooth confidence of someone who had never known struggle. "You remember my order. You come here often enough," Emma said with a small smile. "It would be hard to forget." He studied her for a heartbeat longer than necessary. "Emma, right? Your name tag," she nodded, surprised he had noticed. Most wealthy clients never bothered to learn the staff's names. "Have you worked here long?" Julian asked, setting his tablet aside for the first time since she had started serving him. "Almost 2 years," Emma replied, shifting her weight from one tired foot to the other. "But I should put your order in." "The kitchen gets backed up around this time," of course he said, but something in his expression suggested he wanted to continue the conversation. Emma walked away, feeling his gaze follow her across the dining room. She pushed through the kitchen doors, shaking her head at her own foolishness. Men like Julian Bennett did not see women like her as anything more than part of the furniture. She was there to serve, not to engage. Yet over the following weeks their brief exchanges grew longer. He asked about her day. She learned he ran a technology investment firm worth hundreds of millions. He discovered she was studying online to finish her business degree, squeezing classes between shifts. Their conversations remained appropriate, professional, but something unspoken hung in the air between them. "You should apply to work in finance after graduation," Julian suggested one evening, as Emma cleared his dessert plate. "You have the mind for it." Emma laughed softly, the sound tinged with weariness. "Mr. Bennett, people like me do not get jobs in finance. We serve people who work in finance." His brow furrowed. "That is not true. Talent matters more than background." "In a perfect world, maybe," Emma said, her voice gentle but firm. "But this is not a perfect world." Before Julian could respond, his phone buzzed urgently. He glanced at the screen and sighed, standing quickly. "I have to go. Emergency meeting." He pulled out his wallet and left $300 on the table for a $60 meal. "Keep the change, Emma, and think about what I said." Orchestrated narrative continuation, targeting word count specifications. Good start. "I need to continue with the accident scene," and Emma's response. "Let me keep going with part 1, making sure to hit around 1,300 words." Emma watched him leave, the generous tip in her hand feeling both wonderful and somehow sad. He meant well, but he did not understand. The world he lived in and the world she survived in were separated by walls no amount of positive thinking could break down. That was the last normal conversation they would ever have. 3 days later, Emma was restocking the bar when her coworker Ashley rushed over, her phone clutched in her hand. "Emma, turn on the news. That guy who always sits at table 7, the rich one, he was in a terrible accident." Emma's heart stopped. She grabbed Ashley's phone and stared at the breaking news alert. Tech mogul Julian Bennett in critical condition after highway collision. The article described a multi-car pileup on the interstate. Julian's vehicle had been hit by a semi-truck that lost control in the rain. He was alive, but had sustained severe head trauma. The phone slipped from Emma's fingers, clattering on the polished floor. "Which hospital?" she heard herself ask. "Memorial General, I think." "But Emma, why does it matter? You cannot just visit him. They will not let you in." But Emma was already untying her apron, her mind racing. She did not know why it mattered so much. Julian Bennett was a customer, nothing more. Yet the thought of him lying in a hospital bed, alone and hurt, made her chest tighten with something she could not name. She took 3 buses to reach Memorial General, arriving as visiting hours were ending. The ICU nurse looked at her with suspicion when she asked about Julian Bennett. "Are you family?" the nurse asked, her tone making it clear she already knew the answer. "I am a close friend," Emma lied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Please, I just need to know if he is okay." The nurse's expression softened slightly. "He is stable, but unconscious. No visitors except immediate family right now. Come back tomorrow." Emma returned the next day, and the day after that. On the 4th day, Julian was moved to a private recovery room. Emma sat in the waiting area, watching his sister Rachel and business partner Thomas come and go. They looked stressed, talking in hushed voices about board meetings and stock prices. No one seemed to be talking about Julian himself. On the 7th day, Emma walked past the nurse's station when she heard raised voices from Julian's room. "You need to remember, Julian. Your name is Julian Bennett. You own Bennett Capital. You have obligations, responsibilities." Thomas's voice was sharp with frustration. "I do not know you," a weaker voice responded, and Emma's breath caught. Julian was awake. "I do not know anyone. Everyone who comes in here is a stranger." Emma should have kept walking. Instead, she found herself at the doorway, peering inside. Julian sat propped up in bed, looking lost and frightened despite his expensive hospital gown. His head was bandaged, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. Their gazes met, and something extraordinary happened. His frightened expression eased, just a fraction. "You," he said softly. "I know you." Emma's eyes widened. "You remember me?" "No," Julian admitted, "but you feel familiar. Like something good I cannot quite recall." Rachel and Thomas turned to stare at Emma. "Who are you?" Rachel demanded. "How do you know my brother?" "I am Emma Rodriguez. I work at Celestial, the restaurant where Mr. Bennett dines regularly. A waitress." Thomas's tone dripped with disdain. "Julian, she is just someone who served you food. She does not know you." But Julian was still looking at Emma, and slowly he extended his hand toward her. "Will you stay? Everyone else makes my head hurt, but you do not." Emma glanced at Rachel and Thomas, both of whom looked outraged. Then she looked back at Julian, at the desperate hope in his eyes, and made a decision that would change everything. She crossed the room and took his hand. "I will stay," Emma promised, settling into the chair beside his bed. "As long as you need me." Rachel opened her mouth to protest, but the doctor, entering behind them, cut her off. "Whoever this is, do not send her away. Patients with amnesia often respond better to faces that trigger positive emotional responses, even if they cannot remember why. If he finds her presence comforting, that is therapeutically valuable." Over the following days, Emma became Julian's constant companion. She took a leave of absence from both her jobs, burning through her meager savings. She read to him when headaches made it hard for him to focus. She walked with him during physical therapy, her hand steady on his arm when his balance faltered. She answered his questions about the world with patience, never overwhelming him with too much information at once. Julian's family and associates grew increasingly frustrated. How could a nobody waitress have more influence over him than the people who actually mattered in his life? But the doctors supported Emma's presence. Julian was healing faster with her there, both physically and mentally. Late one evening, when the hospital had grown quiet, Julian turned to Emma with an expression of vulnerability she had never seen before. "Emma," he said softly, "before the accident, were we close?" Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. She should tell him the truth, that she was just a waitress who served him salmon twice a week, that they had shared nothing but polite small talk and his generous tips, that she had no real place in his life. Instead, she found herself saying, "We knew each other. We talked sometimes." It was not quite a lie, but it was not quite the truth either. And with those words, Emma stepped onto a path that would lead them both somewhere unexpected, wonderful, and terrifying. Julian smiled, the first real smile she had seen since he woke up. "I am glad," he said, squeezing her hand gently, "because right now, in this moment, you are the only real thing in my world." Emma squeezed back, blinking away tears she did not want him to see. She had come to the hospital out of concern for a customer. She had stayed out of compassion for a lonely, frightened man. But now, holding his hand in the dim hospital room, she realized with startling clarity that she was staying for a very different reason. Somewhere between his broken memories and her quiet dedication, something was blooming between them. Something that should not exist. Something that defied every logical boundary of their separate worlds. And Emma, for the first time in her careful, practical life, decided to let it grow. 3 weeks after the accident, the doctors cleared Julian for discharge. Rachel insisted he return to his estate in the hills, where a full staff would attend to his every need. Thomas argued he should move into a supervised medical facility with round-the-clock care. But when they asked Julian what he wanted, he looked directly at Emma. "I want to go wherever she goes," he said simply. The room erupted in protests, but Julian remained calm. "I do not remember my estate. I do not remember any staff. I only know that Emma makes me feel safe. If you want me to recover, stop fighting me on this." Eventually, they reached a compromise. Julian would stay in a comfortable, furnished apartment, paid for by his estate, located just 2 blocks from where Emma lived. Emma would be his primary caregiver, compensated generously for her time. Rachel made her disapproval crystal clear. But even she could not deny that Julian responded to Emma in ways he did not respond to anyone else. The apartment was modest by Julian's standards, but luxurious by Emma's. 2 bedrooms. A modern kitchen, large windows that let in streams of golden sunlight. When the movers left and the doors finally closed, Julian and Emma stood together in the living room, suddenly alone, in a way they had never been before. "This is strange," Julian said, walking to the window. "They tell me I owned a mansion with 12 bedrooms, but this place feels more like home than any description of that house." Emma set down the bag of his medications, her heart beating faster than it should. Maybe home is not about the size of the space. Maybe it is about feeling comfortable in it. Julian turned to face her, and something in his expression made Emma's breath catch. Or maybe it is about who you share the space with. The first few days established a routine. Emma woke early and made breakfast, while Julian did the exercises his physical therapist prescribed. They ate together, talking about everything and nothing. Emma told him about her childhood in a small border town, about her mother who cleaned houses and her father who worked construction. Julian listened with genuine interest, never showing the boredom or condescension she had expected. In return, Emma learned about the man Julian was becoming, separate from the man he had been. Without memories of his corporate identity, he was curious about ordinary things. He marveled at the taste of fresh bread from the corner bakery. He spent an hour watching children play in the park, fascinated by their uninhibited joy. He asked Emma questions about her dreams, her fears, her favorite books and songs. Before the accident, Julian said one morning over coffee, "Was I happy?" Emma paused, her cup halfway to her lips. She thought about the man who had sat alone at table 7, always working, always distant. "I think you were successful," she said carefully. "But I am not sure that is the same thing as happy."
Ow.
Julian nodded slowly. "I do not want to go back to being that person. Whatever I was before, I like who I am now better." As weeks passed, the invisible boundary between caregiver and patient began to blur. Emma caught herself watching Julian when he was not looking, noticing the way sunlight caught in his dark hair, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. Julian found excuses to touch her hand when she passed him things, to sit close to her on the couch during evening movies, to make her laugh just to hear the sound. One rainy evening, they were cooking dinner together when Julian accidentally knocked over a jar of tomato sauce. It shattered on the floor, red sauce splashing across the white tiles. Emma rushed to help clean it up, and they ended up kneeling side by side, wiping up the mess with paper towels. "I am sorry," Julian said, looking embarrassed. "I am still clumsy sometimes." "It is just a jar," Emma replied, smiling. "Nothing to apologize for." But when she looked up, Julian was staring at her with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. Slowly giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin with reverent gentleness. "Emma," he whispered, "tell me I am not imagining this. Tell me you feel it too." She should have stopped it. She should have reminded him that he was her patient, that she was being paid to care for him, that their entire relationship was built on a complicated half-truth. Instead, she closed the distance between them and kissed him. The kiss was soft at first, tentative and questioning. Then Julian's other hand slid into her hair, and Emma's arms wrapped around his neck. Suddenly nothing was tentative anymore. The kiss deepened, filled with weeks of longing and restraint, finally released. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Emma saw her own desire reflected in Julian's eyes. "I have been wanting to do that since the moment I woke up in that hospital," Julian confessed, his forehead resting against hers. "You are the only thing that makes sense in this confusing world." They did not clean up the rest of the tomato sauce that night. Instead, they moved to the couch, where they talked and kissed and held each other until the rain stopped and stars emerged in the clear sky. Emma felt herself falling, tumbling into emotions she had sworn to keep contained. She knew it was dangerous. She knew the truth would eventually surface and shatter everything. But in that moment, with Julian's arms around her and his heart beating beneath her palm, she decided the risk was worth it. Their relationship shifted after that night. They were no longer just caregiver and patient. They were two people building something real, something that felt destined despite the impossible circumstances. Julian was gentle with her, treating her like she was precious, something to be cherished rather than taken for granted. Emma had never been loved like this before. With such complete attention and devotion, they went on walks through the city, visited museums, shared ice cream in the park. Julian was learning the world again through Emma's eyes, seeing beauty and simplicity. Emma was learning what it felt like to be truly seen by someone, not as a waitress or a struggling student, but as a woman worthy of love and respect. But guilt gnawed at Emma's conscience with increasing intensity. Julian deserved to know the truth about his life, about his wealth and power and responsibilities. He deserved to know that she had not been his girlfriend, or even his friend before the accident. That she was just a waitress he had tipped well and spoken kindly to a few times. Yet every time she gathered the courage to tell him, she saw the peace in his eyes and could not bring herself to shatter it. The world he came from would take him away from her. She knew that with absolute certainty, so she told herself she would wait just one more day, then another, then another. 3 months after the accident, Rachel appeared at their apartment door unannounced. Emma felt her stomach drop when she saw Julian's sister standing in the hallway. Her expression, a mixture of determination and barely contained anger. "We need to talk," Rachel said, pushing past Emma without invitation. "Julian, I have been patient. I have given you space to heal. But the board is demanding answers. Your company needs you. Your life is waiting for you." Julian took Emma's hand, pulling her close to his side. "This is my life now, Rachel. I am happy here. Happy." Rachel's voice rose. "Julian, you are living in a tiny apartment, eating takeout, pretending to be someone you are not. You have responsibilities. You have a fortune that needs managing. You have a future that does not include playing house with a waitress." "Do not speak about Emma that way," Julian said sharply, his grip on Emma's hand tightening. "Why not? It is the truth." Rachel turned to Emma, her eyes cold. "Have you told him? Have you explained what you really were to him before the accident? Or have you been letting him believe you were something more?" Emma felt the color drain from her face. Julian looked at her, confusion clouding his features. "Emma, what is she talking about?" "Julian," Emma began, her voice shaking, "I need to tell you something." "She was your waitress," Rachel interrupted, her words cutting like knives. "You went to that restaurant twice a week for business dinners? She served you food. You were nice to her, because that is the kind of person you were. But you barely knew her name. You certainly were not dating her, or in love with her, or any of the fantasies she has been letting you believe." The room fell silent except for the sound of Emma's ragged breathing. Julian dropped her hand, taking a step back. "Is that true?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. Yes and no. Everything she said is factually true. But Julian, you have to understand you lied to me, Julian said, his voice hollow. All this time, you let me believe we had something before the accident. You let me fall in love with someone who does not exist? That is not true, Emma protested desperately. I never claimed we were together before. I just did not correct your assumptions. And Julian, what we have built these past 3 months is real. My feelings for you are real. How can I believe anything you say? Julian asked, and the pain in his voice broke Emma's heart. My entire reality was based on thinking you were someone I knew, someone I trusted before I lost everything. But you were just a waitress who saw an opportunity. An opportunity, Emma repeated, anger flashing through her grief. I gave up my jobs to take care of you. I spent every day helping you heal. I fell in love with you, not with your money or your status. I fell in love with the man you are now, without all the walls and distance of who you were before. That is very convenient to say now that you have been caught, Rachel interjected coldly. Julian, you need to come home. You need to remember who you really are. This fantasy life has gone on long enough. Julian looked between Emma and his sister, confusion and hurt warring across his features. I need time to think. Both of you, please leave. Julian, Emma whispered. Tears streaming down her face. Said leave, he repeated, his voice firmer now but edged with exhaustion. Rachel took Emma's arm, guiding her toward the door with surprising gentleness, despite her earlier harshness. You have done enough damage, she said quietly. Let my brother heal without your complications. Emma found herself in the hallway, the door closing behind her with terrible finality. She stood there for a long moment, tears blurring her vision, her whole world crumbling around her. She had known this moment would come. She had known the truth would destroy what they had built. But knowing it was coming did not make it hurt any less. Emma returned to her actual apartment that night, the tiny studio that suddenly felt even smaller and lonelier than before. She sat on her bed, still wearing the clothes from that terrible confrontation, and let herself cry properly for the first time. She had lost Julian. She had lost the future she had dared to imagine with him. And worse, she had hurt him in the process of falling in love with him. The next morning, Emma forced herself back to work at Celestial. The manager was understanding about her extended leave, but made it clear she was lucky to still have a job. Emma moved through her shifts mechanically, smiling at customers, taking orders, pretending her heart was not shattered into 1,000 pieces. Table 7 remained empty for 2 weeks. Then one evening, Thomas Reed appeared and sat down in Julian's usual spot. Emma approached with dread pooling in her stomach. Emma Rodriguez, Thomas said, his voice carrying the smooth menace of someone who enjoyed having power over others. We need to discuss something important. Emma set down a water glass with hands that wanted to shake. I do not work for Mr. Bennett anymore. There is nothing to discuss. On the contrary, there is quite a bit to discuss. Thomas pulled out an envelope and set it on the table. Julian's memories are starting to return. Fragments at first, then larger pieces. He is remembering who he is, what he built, the life he led before the accident. Emma's heart clenched. Is he okay? Physically, yes. Emotionally? Thomas shrugged. That is complicated. The old Julian is coming back, but he is fighting it. He keeps talking about you, about the life you two built together. It is interfering with his recovery, with his ability to resume his responsibilities. What do you want from me? Emma asked quietly. I want you to disappear completely. Thomas pushed the envelope toward her. There is $50,000 in here. Take it, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and never contact Julian again. Let him move on with his real life. Emma stared at the envelope like it was a snake. You think you can pay me to forget him? I think you are a practical woman who understands that fairy tales do not happen in real life. Julian Bennett moves in circles you will never be part of. Even if he thinks he loves you now, that will fade once he fully remembers who he is. Save yourself the heartbreak and take the money. Emma picked up the envelope, and for a moment, Thomas looked satisfied. Then she tore it in half and let the pieces fall on the table. Tell Mr. Bennett that if he wants me gone from his life, he can tell me himself, Emma said with quiet dignity. I will not be bought off like I am some kind of problem to solve. She walked away from the table, her head high despite the trembling in her legs. She did not know if she had just made a brave choice or a foolish one. But she knew she could not take blood money for loving someone. 2 days later, Emma was leaving her evening class at the community college when she noticed a familiar car parked across the street. Her heart stuttered when Julian stepped out, wearing one of his expensive suits that she had seen in photographs but never in person. He looked like the man from the magazine articles about tech moguls, polished and powerful and completely out of her reach. "Hello, Emma," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Julian." She gripped her backpack straps to keep her hands from shaking. "Your memories came back. Most of them, yes." He walked closer, and she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "I remember Bennett Capital, every deal I ever made, every strategy session and board meeting. I remember my house, my cars, my entire life before the accident." "Then you remember that I was just someone who served you dinner," Emma said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "You remember that everything I let you believe was built on a lie." "I remember that version of events," Julian agreed. "But I also remember the past 3 months. I remember learning to walk again, with your hand holding mine. I remember laughing until my sides hurt at terrible movies you picked. I remember falling asleep on the couch with you in my arms. And Emma, I remember falling in love with you completely and irrevocably." Emma's breath caught. "Julian, you do not have to say that. You do not owe me anything. I am not saying it out of obligation. I am saying it because it is true." Julian stepped closer, close enough that she could see the sincerity burning in his eyes. "When my memories came back, I remembered being lonely. I remembered working 80-hour weeks and coming home to empty rooms. I remembered thinking success and money were enough. But they were not enough, Emma. I was miserable." Tears began sliding down Emma's cheeks. "You can have anyone you want. You do not need a waitress with student loans and secondhand clothes." "You're right. I do not need a waitress." Julian reached up and gently wiped away her tears. "But I need Emma Rodriguez, the woman who saw me as a person instead of a bank account. I need the woman who made me laugh and challenged me to think differently and showed me what real connection feels like. I need you." "What about your sister? Your company? Your entire world?" Emma asked desperately. "They will never accept us together. Then they can adjust." Julian's voice was firm. "I spent 35 years building a fortune and a reputation. And in 3 months with you, I was happier than in all those years combined. I would be an absolute fool to choose money and status over genuine love." "But I lied to you," Emma whispered. "I let you believe things that were not true." "You did," Julian acknowledged, "and that hurt. But Emma, I understand why. You were trying to help me heal, to protect me from overwhelming information. Was it the right choice? Maybe not. But your intentions came from care, not manipulation. And in the end, what we built together was real, regardless of how it started." Emma searched his face, looking for doubt or uncertainty. But all she saw was determination and love and hope for a future she had thought was impossible. "I cannot give you the life you were used to," she said, one last protest against the impossibility of it all. "I cannot attend charity galas or host dinner parties for millionaires. I do not fit in your world." Julian smiled, the same warm smile she had fallen in love with in that tiny apartment. "Then we will build a new world, one that fits both of us. I have been thinking about what to do with all that money I apparently have. I could create something meaningful. A foundation that helps people like you, people with talent and drive who just need an opportunity. I could use my privilege to open doors instead of keeping them closed. You would do that?" Emma asked, hope flickering to life in her chest. "I would do anything for you," Julian said simply. "But more than that, I want to do it because it is right. You showed me there is more to life than profit margins and stock prices. You showed me how to care about people as people. That is worth more than any business deal I ever made." Emma laughed through her tears, the sound shaky but genuine. "Your business partner is going to hate me even more. Thomas can find another job if he cannot accept my choices. I am done letting other people dictate my life." Julian took both her hands in his. "Emma Rodriguez, I am asking you to take a chance on us. Not because of who I was before the accident, and not despite our complicated beginning, but because of who we can be together. What do you say?" Emma looked at this man who had traveled from her world to his and then deliberately chosen to meet her in the middle. She thought about all the reasons it could not work, all the obstacles they would face, all the people who would judge them. Then she thought about the way he made her laugh, the way he listened when she talked, the way he looked at her like she was the most important person in any room. "I say yes," Emma whispered, and then louder, "Yes, Julian. I want to build that future with you." Julian pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was something precious he had nearly lost. Emma wrapped her arms around him and held on just as tightly. They stood there on the sidewalk outside her community college. Two people from different worlds who had found each other in the most unexpected way. "I love you," Julian said against her hair. "The man I was before would never have said those words. But the man I am now, the man you helped me become, cannot imagine saying anything else." "I love you too," Emma replied, her voice muffled against his chest. "Even when it seemed impossible, even when it scared me, I loved you." They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other and the promise of an uncertain but hopeful future. Then Julian pulled back slightly, a mischievous glint in his eye. "So, about that $50,000 Thomas tried to give you," he said. "Can I ask what you did with it?" Emma could not help but smile. "I tore it up and left it on the table for him to clean up." Julian laughed, the sound rich and unrestrained. "That is my Emma. Never taking the easy way out." "Your Emma," she repeated, testing the words. They felt right, like something she had been waiting her whole life to hear. "My Emma," Julian confirmed. "If you will have me, all of me, the memories and the blank spaces, the millionaire and the man who forgot everything." "I will have all of you," Emma promised. "As long as you will have all of me, the waitress and the student and the woman who fell in love with you twice." They kissed then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Around them, the city continued its endless motion, people rushing past on their way to destinations unknown. But Emma and Julian stood still in their own perfect moment. Two souls who had found each other through memory loss and rediscovered each other. Through truth, the journey ahead would not be simple. Rachel would need time to accept their relationship. The business world would gossip and judge. Emma would have to navigate social situations she had never been trained for. And Julian would have to prove his transformation was permanent. Not just a side effect of amnesia, but they would face it all together, building something new from the ashes of who they used to be. Julian would use his wealth to create opportunities for others. And Emma would finish her degree and become his true partner in every sense. They would make mistakes and learn from them. They would argue and make up. They would grow together into people neither of them could have imagined being alone. Years later, when people asked them how they met, they would smile at each other with shared understanding. They would tell a story about a car accident and lost memories, about a waitress who stayed when everyone else left, about love that grew in the space between who someone was and who they could become. And they would never mention the complicated beginning or the painful middle, because none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was the ending they wrote together, one choice at a time, one day at a time, one loving moment at a time. Emma had once told Julian that people like her did not get fairy tale endings. But standing in his arms that evening, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, she realized she had been wrong. Fairy tales were not about glass slippers or magical transformations. They were about two imperfect people choosing each other despite impossible odds. And this fairy tale, their fairy tale, was just beginning.